My husband asked me to support his 8-year-old sister. My in-laws said they were broke and penniless. But when I confronted and blocked them, Sierra sent me photos of her new apartment in 2024, Honda Civic, that her poor parents bought her. I'm 25 years old. I work in digital marketing, and honestly, I need to tell this story because I feel like I'm going to lose my mind if I don't get it out of my system. What happened a few weeks ago with my husband's family basically confirmed all the red flags I'd been ignoring for the past 2 years, and now that everything exploded, I need someone to tell me if I'm crazy or if I really did the right thing. I guess I should start at the beginning, when Aaron and I decided to move like 2 years ago. Look, Aaron and I got married when I was 23 and he was 24, and at first everything was perfect. I mean, typical newlywed couple that thinks love conquers all and all that shit. We lived like 20 minutes from his parents, Victor and Judith, and I tried to get along with them even though I always felt like Judith looked at me weird, like I was never good enough for her son, you know? But anyway, Aaron is an only child except for his younger sister, Sierra, who at that time was like 16 and was the typical spoiled kid who got everything she wanted. Not that I was jealous or anything, but it was obvious that girl had never heard the word no in her life. Everything changed when I was offered an amazing job in another city, like the opportunity of my lifetime, with a salary that was almost double what I was making at the time. Aaron works from home as a web developer, so for him it was perfect because he could literally work from anywhere with internet. When we told his parents we were moving like 1,200 miles away, I thought Victor was going to have a heart attack right there in their living room. Judith didn't say anything at that moment. She just looked at me with that face I already knew, that I told you so face, even though she technically hadn't told me anything yet. The goodbye was super awkward. Victor barely spoke to us and Judith hugged us, but in that cold way. You know, like when you hug someone at a funeral but don't really want to be there. I remember when we got in the rental car with all our stuff, Aaron was quiet, very quiet. And I knew he felt guilty, but he squeezed my hand and told me, "We did the right thing. This is for our future." And I believed him. I mean, I wanted to believe him. The first months in the new city were like honeymoon version 2.0. We got a nice apartment, 2 bedrooms because we thought we'd eventually need the extra space. My job was everything I expected and more. And Aaron was happy working from home and exploring the city when he finished early. But the calls with his parents were getting more and more tense. At first they called like every 2 days, then once a week, and then basically only on birthdays or holidays. Every time we talked, Judith found a way to mention how much they missed Aaron, or how family should be together, or stuff like that. Never directly aggressive, just those passive-aggressive comments that make you feel like shit, but you can't say anything because technically they didn't say anything wrong. Fast forward like a year and a half after the move. I was super into my work. Aaron was doing well, and we'd built a decent life here. We had friends, we knew good restaurants, we had our routines, and then we got the call. Sierra, who was already 18, had been accepted to a university that was like 40 minutes from where we lived. Victor called us, which was weird because usually it was Judith who called, and told us that Sierra wanted to live with us while she studied, because that way she'd be close to family and wouldn't have to live in the purpose dorms, which according to him were dangerous. Aaron looked at me when his dad said that, and I honestly didn't know what to say. I mean, she was his sister. We technically had the space, and refusing would have been super obvious that we didn't want to. So we said yes, naively thinking it would be temporary, that Sierra would be responsible, that it would be a good opportunity to reconnect with Aaron's family. Spoiler alert, it was the worst decision we've made in our married life. Sierra arrived like 6 months ago with 3 enormous suitcases and the attitude of someone who expected the red carpet rolled out. From day one, she made it clear that she wasn't going to pay rent because, according to her words, we're family and family doesn't charge each other. Aaron and I looked at each other but didn't say anything because, well, technically they were right that we didn't need her money and we thought that at least she could help with house chores or something. How naive we were. The first week was okay. I mean, normal. But then the problems started. Sierra would come home at 3 in the morning completely drunk, making noise, leaving the kitchen a mess. Once she threw up in the bathroom and didn't even clean it. Aaron had to do it the next day. When we told her she needed to be more responsible, she told us she was in college and that was the college experience and that we were boring. She was 18 but acted like she was 15. She wouldn't look for a job, even though we told her it would be good for her to have some financial independence. She spent her days sleeping until noon, watching Netflix, and going out with her new friends from college. The extra room we gave her looked like a disaster zone, with clothes everywhere, dirty dishes, and that weird smell that teenagers' rooms have when they never air them out. Aaron tried to talk to her several times, but Sierra always had an excuse, or said he sounded exactly like their parents, and that's why she'd wanted to leave home in the first place. But the real problem started like 2 months ago. Sierra walked into the living room where Aaron and I were watching a movie and said, "I need you to buy me a car." Just like that, no preamble, no please, nothing. I said, "Excuse me, what?" And she repeated, "I need a car. It's super inconvenient to depend on public transportation to go to college." I explained to her that we didn't have 2 cars either, that we shared one and it worked fine because Aaron worked from home. She made that spoiled kid face I'd seen before and said, "But I can't do that. I need my own car." Aaron told her that if she wanted a car, she could work and save for it, or ask their parents to help her. Sierra got angry, said we were selfish, that she'd left her home to be close to us and the least we could do was make things easier for her. She left the apartment slamming the door and didn't come back until the next day. I thought the subject had ended there, but oh no, that was just the beginning. Like a week later, Victor called us. And when I say the conversation was surreal, I'm not exaggerating. He told us he'd just retired. He was 53, which already seemed weird to me, because who retires at 53? And that therefore, he no longer had the income from before, and that now we, as family, I needed to take care of Sierra. I asked him what he meant exactly by take care of, and he said, "Well, she lives with you. It's your responsibility to cover her expenses, buy her what she needs, like a car, for example." I was in shock. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. Aaron told his dad that didn't make sense, that Sierra was of age, that she could work, that they as parents were still responsible for her. Victor got super defensive and said this was a test, that he wanted to see if we really cared about family or if I had alienated Aaron from his roots and turned him into someone selfish and materialistic. He used those exact words, selfish and materialistic. We hung up the call, and Aaron was shaking with rage. I was more in shock than angry, like trying to process if this was really happening or if it was some elaborate joke. I told Aaron we needed to talk to Sierra and establish clear boundaries because this was getting out of control. He agreed. But before we could do anything, 2 days later, Victor and Judith showed up at our door. They didn't give notice they were coming. They just drove 1,200 miles to show up uninvited. When I opened the door and saw them there, my first thought was that something terrible had happened, like someone had died or something. But no, Victor walked in like it was his house and said, "We need to talk, the 4 of us." Judith looked me up and down, with that disapproving face I was already fed up with. We sat in the living room, and they basically gave us an hour-long sermon about family responsibility, about how I had alienated Aaron from his family, about how it was my obligation as a daughter-in-law to support Sierra, because that's how united families work. Judith said she'd talked to other mothers in her church, and they all agreed that a wife should support her husband's family no matter what. Victor added that if we really loved Sierra, buying her a car would be the minimum, that they had made sacrifices for their children, and now it was our turn. I tried to stay calm and explain to them that we had our own expenses, that we were saving to eventually buy a house, that it wasn't that we didn't want to help Sierra, but buying her a car was too much. Judith interrupted me and said, "See, this is exactly what I feared. You've become selfish and you're turning my son into someone selfish too." That's when something in me broke. I stood up and told them they needed to leave my house. Judith looked at me like I'd slapped her, and Victor started telling me I had no right to kick them out when they'd driven all that way to help us see reason. Aaron, who until that moment had been quiet, stood up and said, "No, Christine is right. You need to leave." His voice sounded different, like firmer than I'd heard it before. Then Aaron told his parents that Sierra had a week to find another place to live, that she was no longer welcome in our apartment, and that if they'd really retired and didn't have money, which he doubted, then Sierra could get student loans and a job like any other college student. Victor turned red with rage and started yelling at Aaron, calling him a traitor, telling him he'd chosen a woman over his own blood, that he was a disgrace to the family. Judith started crying, those manipulative tears I'd seen before in other situations, and pointed at me saying, "This is your fault. You destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I opened the door and told them to leave immediately or I'd call the police. They left. But Victor yelled from the hallway that this wasn't over, that we'd regret it. Sierra came home that night and Aaron told her she had to leave. She started crying and saying she had nowhere to go. How could we do this to her? That we were the worst family in the world. Aaron told her she could go back to their parents or find roommates. But after the week, he was changing the locks. Sierra called her parents crying in front of us, saying we were kicking her out onto the street like she was trash. The next few days were horrible. Sierra wouldn't talk to us. She spent her time locked in her room, or went out without telling us where. I barely slept, feeling guilty but also angry because I knew we hadn't done anything wrong. Aaron seemed calmer, but I knew him well enough to know that inside he was destroyed. He'd just cut ties with his family because of me, or at least that's how I saw it. On the 6th day, Victor and Judith came back to pick up Sierra's stuff. This time there was no conversation, just long faces and death stares. While they were packing, Judith approached me in the kitchen and told me quietly, "You know that eventually Aaron is going to realize he chose wrong. He's going to resent you for alienating him from his family. And when that happens, don't say I didn't warn you." Her words stayed with me, spinning in my head for days. After they left, Aaron hugged me and told me everything was going to be okay, that we'd done the right thing, that his family was being irrational. But I couldn't help feeling that maybe Judith was right, that maybe eventually he was going to blame me for all this, for the distance with his family, for the fight, for everything. I told him, and he kissed my forehead and repeated that he loved me, that his family was wrong, that I didn't have to feel guilty for setting boundaries. About a week of relative peace passed. I mean, peace in the sense that no one from his family contacted us. But then my mom, Maria, called me. She told me that Judith had contacted her on Facebook and sent her really long messages explaining her version of the story, asking that my parents make us see reason, tell us we were being disrespectful and selfish with Aaron's family. My mom, who is the most direct person I know, told me she'd responded to Judith, that she had no right to contact our family to meddle in our marriage, that we were adults capable of making our own decisions, and that if anything, she was proud that I'd set boundaries. My dad, Philip, apparently also responded something similar, but more diplomatic, basically telling them to respect our space and our decisions. And that made me feel a little better, knowing my parents backed me up, but it also gave me more anxiety, because now this had escalated to involve my family too. I told my mom I was sorry they'd gotten involved, and she said, "Mija, you don't have to apologize. That woman is crazy. You did the right thing. And if Aaron didn't support you in this, then that would be the real problem. But clearly, he's on your side." Last night, 3 weeks after the drama, Sierra sent me a message. I expected it to be an apology or something, but no, it was to rub in our faces that her parents had bought her a furnished apartment near her college and a new car, a 2024 Honda Civic or something like that. The message said something like, "Turns out my parents do have money and do care about me, unlike some people," and it came with photos of the car and apartment. I stared at my phone in shock, processing what this meant. All that shit about Victor retiring, about them not having money, about us having to take care of Sierra, it had all been a fucking test. They deliberately lied to see if we'd give in, to see if I had enough control over Aaron to make him choose between me and his family. It was twisted, manipulative, and confirmed everything I'd suspected about them from the beginning. I showed Aaron the message and he just let out a bitter laugh and said, Of course it was a lie. My dad never retired. He has like 3 rental properties. I knew it was a lie, but I wanted to believe they wouldn't go that far. I asked him if he regretted confronting them, and he looked at me seriously and said, Not for a second. If anything, this showed me what they're really like, and I'm glad I found out now and not later when we have kids. That night we blocked Victor, Judith, and Sierra from everywhere. Phones, social media, everything. Aaron sent them one last message before blocking them saying we didn't want any more contact, to respect our decision, and that, when and if someday they were ready to sincerely apologize and respect our marriage, we could consider reconnecting, but until then, we didn't want to hear from them. This morning, Aaron and I had a long conversation about the future. We decided we want to start trying to have kids next year, and that we'll probably move closer to my parents when that happens because we want our kids to grow up near grandparents who really value them and respect their parents. We also talked about going to couples therapy, Not because we have problems, but because we want to process all this in a healthy way and make sure this doesn't affect our marriage long term. The truth is, I still feel weird about all this. Part of me feels guilty. Like maybe I should have handled things differently. Maybe I should have been more diplomatic. Maybe I should have given in about the car to keep the peace. But another part of me, the stronger part now, knows we did the right thing. That setting boundaries isn't being selfish. That a marriage should come before extended family, and that I can't let manipulative and toxic people control my life just because they share blood with my husband. Aaron tells me constantly that he's proud of how I handled everything, that he admires my strength, that he's never going to resent me for this. I want to believe him. I need to believe him, because the alternative is living with the constant fear that Judith was right, that someday he's going to wake up and realize he chose wrong. But when I see him working from home, when we have dinner together and talk about our future plans, when he hugs me at night and tells me we're a team, I convince myself a little more that we're going to be okay. I don't know if someday we'll be able to have a relationship with his family again. Honestly, right now, I don't care. I'm too angry and hurt to even consider it. Maybe in a few years, when we have kids, they'll want to reconnect and be willing to really apologize and respect our boundaries. Or maybe not, maybe this is permanent, and we'll raise our kids without that part of their family. Either way, I know Aaron and I are going to be okay, because we already went through the worst test and came out the other side together, more united than before. My parents visited us last weekend, and it was so different, so healthy. There were no passive-aggressive comments, no demands, no tests. Just a normal family spending time together, cooking, laughing, making plans. My mom told Aaron she considered him like her son, and that she was proud of him for defending his marriage. My dad shook his hand and said, "You did the right thing, son. The family you choose is as important as the family you got." Seeing Aaron with my parents made me realize he's going to be okay, that he's not going to miss the toxicity of his family, because now he has another family that accepts and respects him. Yesterday afternoon, Aaron found me crying in the bathroom. He asked me what was wrong, and I told him I was just processing everything, that I still couldn't believe all this really happened. He hugged me and said, "I know it was difficult. I know it's still difficult. But I wouldn't change anything, because now I know exactly what my priorities are, and you're always going to be number one." I asked him if he ever missed his family, the version of his family from before all this, and he thought for a moment and said, "I miss the idea of what I thought my family was, but now I realize that version never really existed. They were always like this. I just didn't want to see it." I think that conversation helped me more than anything else. It made me realize I didn't destroy his family. His family destroyed itself with its unrealistic expectations and manipulative behavior. I was just the catalyst that exposed what was already broken. And yes, maybe if we'd never moved, if I'd never accepted that job, if we'd kept living near them, maybe things would have been different. But we'd also probably be constantly controlled and manipulated without even realizing it, living our lives trying to please people who were never going to be satisfied. So, yeah, this is my story. The story of how choosing my career and my marriage cost me the relationship with my in-laws, but also taught me that some relationships aren't worth maintaining. The story of how a test designed to make us feel guilty ended up being the best thing that could have happened because it showed us the truth. And the story of how Aaron and I decided that our little family of 2, soon to be 3 or 4, is more important than any external expectations. Did I do the right thing? I still ask myself sometimes, usually at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep. But every time I think about it, I come to the same conclusion. Yes, I did the right thing. Maybe not in the most perfect way. Maybe I could have been more diplomatic at some moments, but the final result is that I set boundaries that needed to be set, and my husband supported me completely. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters.